Alright, it's time to make some crazy money. I'm your host, Mr. Sean, and this is Chimera Miniatures' official YouTube channel. And now that I've just recovered from my off-mic coughing fit, let's get on with the video. Guys, we live in uncertain times where we can't know what to expect one day to the next, but one thing you can always rely on is that Chimera Miniatures offers you high-quality miniatures. Whether it's my one-of-a-kind chimeras kit-bashed from various miniature lines, or the not-safe-for-work hero clicks that you won't find anywhere else, you can be assured that all Chimera Miniatures are quality, and we're working on the quantity. Earlier this week was the last day of January, and it does look like the voting has ended on my giveaway. Sadly, we did not receive a single vote. So, I'll put it to you this way, guys. The next time one of my videos gets 25 comments, at least 400 views, and 100 likes, we will do another brand new giveaway. And we will say that the video will need to get those numbers within the first 7 days of its release. Again, I use this channel to try and drum up views for my business, Chimera Miniatures. I am not monetized. I don't make any money from you watching this video, so I need to get it out to as many people as possible so that they can maybe check out my links, maybe buy a miniature, which is the overall purpose, besides just the point to entertain all of you. So as always, links will be in the descriptions. Also, if you have a story of any kind you would like to me to read, please check out r/Mr. Sean Reads Stories, and if you post your story there, I might read it here. And now that that's out of the way, it's time to read some crazy stories. That really hurts my voice. Today we're going to be looking at posts from r/niceguystories. Nice guys are, of course, the people who have made being nice their entire personality in hopes that in doing the bare minimum of being nice will convince ladies to sleep with them. But here's the thing, they're not even that nice. They're the kind of guys that will open a door for a lady and then do the surprise Pikachu face when she doesn't immediately blow him. They're the kind of guys that will love bomb you after talking to you for 5 seconds and then call you a bitch when you reject them. They're the kind of guys who will make it perfectly obvious that all they want is to get into your pants, and then when you don't go along with it, they'll say, I guess girls only like a-holes. Welcome to the world of the guys who finish last. It's nice guys. Our first story today comes from user 20-something, and it's called College Biology Classmate Turns into Moderate Stalker. When I was 16, I went to college, UK A-levels, in town a few miles from my house. I went to the same college as some friends from school, so most of my classes had at least 1 or 2 people I already knew. I made efforts to make new friends, but spent most of my time hanging out with my old friends between classes. I took a few subjects, but my main focus was biology. It was a small class of only about 6 people, me, 2 friends from school, and some people from other schools. 2 of them were lovely. One of them was today's nice guy. We'll call him Greg. Greg was a few years older than everyone else, as, in his words, he failed because the teachers were unfair and hated him and deliberately marked him down. So he had to retake a few years. Greg was repulsive. He stank to high heaven, and he was so greasy and obviously unwashed that you could see the dandruff flakes on his shoulders from the other side of class. No hate at all those with skin problems, but this was definitely caused by the fact that the guy only seemed to shower and change his clothes once per term. He was also incredibly creepy. He would leer at you from across the room, and would make no effort to hide the fact that he was staring. He also put on a slimy, coy, slick voice when talking to women, but would deliberately lower his voice when talking to other men. We were all creeped out by him, and made no effort to interact. One day I was hanging out with my friends at lunch behind the college, when we noticed Greg basically hiding behind a wall watching us. My friend shouted out to him, "Hey, what do you want?" And he ran away. We had biology next, and when we got to class, he was already in there, visibly seething. My friends and I exchanged looks, and ignored him. A few days later, the same thing happened, except this time when Greg realized we spotted him, he proceeded to walk over and sit on a bench near us, and spent the rest of lunch break trying to butt into our conversations, muttering under his breath, and generally making us super uncomfortable. He didn't leave until we all left to go to biology when he got up and followed us to class, but really close behind me. Like, close enough at one point I felt his breath on my hair as we went up the stairs. I turned round and shot him a few looks, but he didn't get the hint. He then sat next to me in class, completely uninvited. At this point I was getting pretty pissed, as he smelled so bad it was making me feel sick, and he pulled his chair so close to mine he was practically sitting on my lap. I moved my chair closer to my friend and spent the whole class trying to ignore his mouth breathing and muttering. Occasionally, on extended lunch breaks, we would walk into town to get lunch and window shop. More and more often we noticed Greg would follow us at a distance, never coming close enough to talk to us, but close enough that it was obvious he was tailing. A few times we'd tell him to fuck off and he'd disappear and we wouldn't see him again until class. A few weeks later is where he stepped things up. I got to biology early one day, and both of my friends were off sick that day. I'd been crying as I'd had an argument with my long-distance BF and was pretty shaken up. Greg arrived, and it was just the two of us in an empty corridor. He saw I was upset and came super close to me and asked what was wrong. I told him I'd argued with my boyfriend, and I said I was okay, I just needed to calm down. His response? "If you were my girlfriend, I'd never make you cry. Whatever he did to you obviously doesn't deserve you. Why is it always the men who treat women like shit who get the best ones?" He then tried to hug me, and as I was leaning against a locker, I had absolutely nowhere to go and just froze. Thankfully, that's when our teacher came along with my other classmates, so we went into class. Of course, he sat down next to me again and spent the whole class trying to ask me questions about my life, like where I live, how old my boyfriend is, etc. He even tried asking me if I was a virgin, and when I asked him why he wanted to know, that he tried to spin some spiel about it being related to biology, I gave him a disgusted look and practically ran away when class was over. When I next saw my friends, I told them what had happened, with the whole hug thing, etc., and both of them were totally icked out. The next time we were hanging out before class and my friend saw Greg, she told him to leave us all the fuck alone and to never try and touch any of us again. He was visibly furious. And then there were about 5 of us, so he called us all bitches and stomped off. He didn't turn up for class that afternoon. After class, I said bye to my friends and started to walk down to the bus stop to go home. As my friends walked in the opposite direction, I suddenly realized Greg had appeared from nowhere and was following me. He caught up with me and started asking me why I told my friends about the hug, and how he was only trying to be friendly, and how ungrateful I was, and no wonder my boyfriend was abusive to me. I stood at the bus stop and hoped he'd leave, but instead he stood and waited for the bus too. Now I knew for a fact that he didn't take the same bus as me, as I'd seen him multiple times get on the bus heading in the opposite direction to go home. As my bus pulled up, I said, "You don't live this way, why are you getting this bus?" To which he replied that he was going to visit his grandma. I got on the bus and swiftly went and sat down, and of course, he got on right behind me and proceeded to sit next to me, trapping me in by the window. He sat so close to me, and spent a 20-minute ride asking me loads of really intimate questions. When I refused to answer or gave some vague response, he would say something like, "Come on, I'm just trying to get to know you. Why don't you want to be my friend? Is it 'cause I'm ugly?" And all that kind of stuff. As we got closer to my stop, I suddenly realized I did not want this guy knowing where I get off of the bus normally. So I wanted to get off a stop early so I could use the back streets to get home. I said, "Oh, my stop is soon," and he asked where I get off. I replied 2 stops later than my usual one, but I'd like to get up now so I can get ready, as it's usually a busy stop and I don't want to miss it. "Oh, that's my stop too. Maybe I can walk you home." We both got up and I grabbed my bag and hustled straight to the front of the bus, pushing my way through the crowd so I could stand right next to the door. Greg got stuck behind the people, so when I pushed the button to stop before my usual one, I had time to get off the bus and go before he could get to the doors. I looked up as it drove off and saw him glaring at me furiously. I dashed into the nearest back street that connects to a rat run of roads that eventually led to my house, and started walking home. At one point there's a cut-through that enables you to see the road where my usual stop is. And who did I see? Greg. He'd got off the bus at the next stop and was now stalking the streets looking for me. I freaked out and basically ran home, but stopped and checked every few streets that he hadn't found me. When I got home, I rang my friend and told her what happened, and she was furious. I got an email that weekend from my head of year asking me to come in for a meeting on Monday. Turns out my awesome friend had filed an official complaint about Greg on all of our behalf, and as it transpired from the meeting, it wasn't the first time. As far as I'm aware, he was either suspended or expelled. Either way, we didn't see him in class again. Flash forward a few months and I'm in town with a non-college friend when I hear a "Hi, stranger," from behind. As I turned round, Greg swept in and grabbed me into a hug before I could even react. I just stood there, shell-shocked, and my friend looked at me like, "Who's this?" Greg turned to my friend and said, "Oh hi, I'm Greg, an old friend from her college. We lost contact after I had to leave early, and I never got the chance to get her number." My poor friend had no idea who this guy was and was a bit naive, so she was totally taken in by his fake charm. So they stood and chatted for a few min, while I'm just stood there, wishing the earth would swallow me. After a few minutes, I said, "Hey, friend's name, I really want to go check this shop out. Let's go." "Oh, I wanted to go there too. Mind if I join you?" And he started tagging along before I could say anything. He followed my friend and I round the shops for 20 minutes, constantly asking me if I still had a boyfriend, and making jokes to my friend about how we'd make an amazing couple if she'd give us a chance, and it's such a shame when great girls get tied down to shitty guys. My friend started giving me looks, so I pulled her into the women's bathroom and explained who the fuck he was and what was going on. We basically stayed in the bathroom for about 30 minutes until she pops her head out to see if he'd gone, which he had. We swiftly started to make our way back to my car. I was driving now, but as we got to the car park, Greg again appeared out of the ether and started following us, shouting, "You not gonna give me your number then? Fine, you stuck-up cunt. You think you're so good and hot and shit, but you're nothing. You're just a dumb bitch and you deserve to get raped by your arsehole boyfriend." Luckily, there were quite a few people around who turned and stared at him, so he lost his nerve and walked off. I got in my car, drove off at top speed, and thankfully have never seen Greg again, but for a long time I was quite nervous to go into town for fear of running into him again. He tried adding me on Facebook a number of times, and I always ignored him. He even went so far as messaging me on multiple accounts using Instagram, my personal and my odd pages, but I always blocked him. Fuck you, Greg.
So I think the thing that I both love and hate about this story, like, I love it for the level of cringe, but I just hate that this is not something that would not be in real life. Like, this clearly does happen. And that is that this guy took a liking to OP. And rather than try and be her friend, try and figure out what she's about, if there could be anything there, just be a decent person, he decided to remain his same unwashed, smelly, creepy self and just looked for an in. Any in he could find, even if he had to manufacture a narrative in his head to give himself the go-ahead. In this case being one time he was alone with her and found out she'd had a fight with her boyfriend, and so suddenly he made this entire narrative about her boyfriend being a piece of crap, and he was the one who was going to come in and save her and be her boyfriend. And yet, when this clearly didn't happen, rather than coming back to reality, he just kept with this narrative, but also got aggressive. And I mean, it's super cringy. It's super, like, this guy has no sense of self-awareness, but what I still hate these stories because these people are out there and they can be dangerous. I do also think it's always funny when these guys ask women if they're not into them because they're ugly. You see this a lot with incels too, where it's like, oh, you just don't see the real me because I'm not a 10 out of 10 Chad. And it's like, I'm sorry, but most women aren't looking for what I would say is objectively an Adonis. There is no objective standard of beauty. There is always someone out there for you. There's someone who you are their type. But here's the thing. If you smell like the guy in this story supposedly smells, it's not going to matter what you look like because nobody's going to want to get close to you. You know, take a shower. Our next story has one of the creepiest titles I've ever seen on a Nice Guy post. It comes from user NoDependent1991 and is called "Nice Guy Breaks Into My Hospital Records to Ask Me Out on a Date." This was when I was 19 and had went to the hospital because of some health complications. I had no health insurance, so I filed for charity care. Because of the health complications, I lost a bit of weight, hadn't slept so had darker eye circles than usual, and just wore general misery on my face. I came into the charity care office, and this man showed me into his cubicle. He was wearing tight pants, a well-fitted button-up, and a scarf, and looked pretty fashionable. He also had a soft voice and demeanor about him. He was making idle chit-chat and making a few jokes here and there as he was filling out my paperwork. I was looking at the ground most of the time, as I didn't have it in me to keep up. He then got to the question of if I was married, single, or separated. And I said single, and he chuckled and said, "That's good." At this point, I looked up to him, and he was smiling at me. I asked myself if he was flirting and considered telling him I still have a boyfriend even though I'm not married. I know this was bad of me, but based off how he dressed and talked, I assumed he was gay. And with how I was looking, I didn't think anyone would be flirting with me. Considering all this, I figured he was just trying to be personable and shook off the thought. The paperwork was done, we said our goodbyes, and I went home. The next night I got a text from an unknown number saying, "Hey, it's me so-and-so from the hospital. Wanted to ask you if you'd like to hang out." I asked how he got my number, and he responded with, "I went into your file." I was shocked but not surprised and decided not to respond. I told my boyfriend about the text and he got angry that this guy could look into my personal information, where my social security and address is, and was mad that I wasn't mad. I realized he was right and that it was a safety concern, so I texted the hospital guy back saying, "This is very inappropriate. You looked into my personal file and took my private information without my consent. I should report to you for this. Who else are you doing this to?" He texted back saying something along the lines of, "I'm so sorry. This is my first time ever doing this. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I'm a good guy, I promise. I won't ever text you again. Please don't report me." I didn't want the guy to lose his job, so I told him I wouldn't report him, and he thanked me and said he'd never do it again. My boyfriend said he would report him, but I don't think he ever did either. Funnily enough, some years later, my friend told me that the same thing happened to her sister at the same hospital. I don't know if it was him or not. Please, please, please don't take someone's personal information without their consent to ask them out for a date. Just ask them out when you see them. Alright, first of all, shame on the nice guy in the story for doing what he did. That's super creepy. That's an abuse of his position. You should never do something like that to people who are just trying to get their medical care paid for. You decided to use your position dealing with vulnerable people in need of medical care to look through confidential information in an attempt to get a date. And somehow, knowing this was wrong, you still managed to do mental gymnastics to tell yourself you were in the right to do it. You're a piece of shit. But second, shame on you, OP. You should have reported this guy, because clearly this keeps happening at this hospital. Even if it wasn't the same guy later on that did this to your friend's sister, apparently this is allowed to go on at this hospital, probably because people like yourself don't report the people because you feel bad for them. You want them to keep their job. Why would you want this guy to keep his job when he is harassing people in a vulnerable state like yourself? You should have wanted him fired. Even if you reporting him didn't get him fired, it would have created a paper trail. There have been these complaints before. Sometimes you don't always get fired just because some random person makes a claim, but if enough people do, yeah, it's a pattern of behavior. It's too many times to be a coincidence, and then if people start getting fired for doing this, then that sends the message to everybody else there that this will not be tolerated. But because you did nothing, this guy was potentially able to keep doing this. People need to be willing to speak up about this stuff, or it's going to keep happening, and if you remain silent, shame on you. Because your experience was rather mild. He just asked you out on a date and you said no and he backed off. What if someone really needed this care and this guy was somehow in charge of whether they got it or not, and he used that to coerce them into actually saying yes to the date, not giving them an option if they wanted to get the care they needed? What if this man was able to escalate and that happened all because you said nothing? Think about that. Also, not to keep dogging on the OP, but your final line where you tell people that they should just ask someone out when they see them instead of looking up their personal information. No, if you're in any position where you are dealing with people and you're going to have that kind of information because of, working in a hospital, anything like that, don't ask those people out. I'm sorry, there are so many other people in the world. So what if you feel like you're going to miss out? You miss out. Don't abuse your position to ask people out. Just don't do it. Alright guys, our final story this video comes from user Utolia and is called Walgreens Weirdo. I lived in a town for a bit where the only thing resembling a grocery store nearby was a Walgreens about 1.5 miles away. So sometimes if I couldn't afford gas to go to the store in another town, I would go there. There was a manager there, Brandon, who was always super flirty with me. I flirted back at first, it seemed fun. Then he asked me what I did once. Totally innocent question, I thought. So I told him I worked with dogs. So he told me he had friends who needed a dog sitter and, "Oh, here's my number. Send me your contact info and I'll pass it along to them." I took the number, but inside I was like, okay, guy just gave you his number in a really weird, indirect way. Definitely weird. But I still thought it was fairly innocuous. So I still went to that Walgreens. Next time, dude, of course, was there. And he handed me his number again, saying his friends really needed a sitter. I walked off and threw the number in the trash again. In my head, I was like, okay, dude is being a little too persistent. What do you think happened to it the first time, asshole? I went home and forgot about it. Until the next day, when I got a call from an unknown number. I made the mistake of answering, which I will never do again, ever. I thought it might be a client whose number I forgot to save. It happens. It was Brandon. It turns out he had watched me put in my phone number on the little card reader and stolen it from that. It also turns out he had an entire relationship between us built up in his head, what's called a parasocial relationship. He thought I was his girlfriend, which, considering he didn't even have my phone number until the day before, was way beyond effed up. He had told his friends and family all about me and how we were dating, and they were all so looking forward to meeting me on Thanksgiving, which was a couple days away. He also told me he knew my address from the computer and he was going to show up dressed as a dog so he could stay at my house. I was super freaked out. I hung up on him, texted him to never try to contact me again, blocked him, called the cops, and had to go down to the station and file a report and tell them the whole story. I also called Walgreens headquarters and reported him to them. Then I had no idea where I was going to stay. I had dogs with me, and thankfully one of them is fucking enormous. But I also didn't want to put him in danger. I didn't know if this dude Brandon had a gun or something. I mean, this is the US. I couldn't take the dogs to my parents' house. There were 3 of them, and with the one being so huge and my parents' house being totally not dog-proofed. So I finally contacted the dog's owners. The 3 were from one family, and told them there was a weirdo stalking me. They thankfully said I could stay at their place. I think it was partially for my safety, but mostly for the dogs. The cops arrested Brandon. It turned out he'd stalked at least one woman before and had broken into her house. He got charged with a number of things on my account. I'm guessing Walgreens did a background check, but maybe they only cared about financial crimes and nothing else. Who knows? I sure don't. First off, just let me say kudos to OP for doing everything right in this situation. There might be some that tell you should have never flirted with him in the first place, but let's be honest, you could have been the rudest fucking bitch to this guy in the world and he'd still think you were flirting with him. You weren't dumb enough to give him your phone number. He had to go out of his way to get it, which just makes it so when he tells the cops that you're his girlfriend, you have proof that you're not. You got the cops involved, you let people know what was going on, you called corporate headquarters, like you did everything correctly, and I applaud you for that, OP. I will say this story made me look at something from my own life a little differently. For about a decade, I worked in retail, both at a grocery store and then later I managed a gas station. And one of the things that we would do, much like at Walgreens, is could have people put in their phone number to access if they didn't have their rewards card with them. But unlike Walgreens, where you type it in yourself, we had to have people actually tell us their phone number. And when they did, their information would pop up on the screen, we'd confirm it, and we'd apply their purchase to their rewards account. And a lot of people were very hesitant to do this, especially women. Now, at the time, when they'd give us, pushback on this, we'd kind of just roll our eyes, because it's like, look, lady, I'm not going to remember your phone number. I don't really care. I don't care if you get these points or not. I just want to get to the next person. But they had no idea if I was a creep. Some of these people did see me quite frequently if they were regulars, so maybe they didn't want me knowing their phone number. Not that I ever was able to remember any of them anyway, because I didn't try. But yeah, knowing that there's someone who was literally willing to look at you typing in the number close enough to know exactly what buttons you were typing, memorize them, and then look you up in the computer and reach out to you, I'm pretty sure that's what my customers were hoping to avoid. It's really sad how many creeps are out there and that we have to look at everyone as a potential creep because of these guys, even though I would guess that they make up a vast minority of people. Because while you might deal with 1,000 non-creeps, you only have to deal with one for them to totally fuck up your life. And guys, that is going to be our video for today. While these stories were told in fun and for entertainment, I do hope you realize they serve a valuable lesson that is important to be aware, be safe, and realize that you deserve to be treated with respect. Please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to check the links, buy a mini, share the links with your friends, maybe have them buy a mini. This is the purpose of this channel, both to entertain and also to sell my minis. My apologies for not having any videos come out last week. It was just a very busy week, but I will try to get back on the schedule. Next video should be RPG horror stories. If you like these videos, be sure to share them around. And until next time, guys, I'm Mr. Sean. This is Chimera Miniatures' official YouTube channel. I hope you alpha great day and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye.